Hey, Dan, I don't recall you having sent through the script for the skit we're supposed to do.
Yeah, about that, Justin. You didn't get one because, well, I haven't done one.
Dan, wait, you haven't done one?
I haven't done one.
You haven't done one?
That's right. I have absolutely not done one.
Can I ask why?
Well, Justin, it's like this. I was starting to feel like M. Night Shyamalan. You know, his films became all about the twist endings, the pressure to keep them coming, improving, innovating, evolving. The skits, man, they were just starting to take on a life of their own, alienating friends. They know who they are. I just feel it's time to put the skits to rest.
Dan, that's why we don't have a skit, because you're comparing yourself to M. Night Shyamalan.
No, the truth is I forgot to write one.
Why didn't you just say that?
I didn't want the listeners to know.
You realize we are recording right now, don't you? In fact, you pressed record yourself.
Right, whoa, Justin, let's take a breath here. So you're saying we're a couple of minutes into the episode of Pilot Views. We've spent it discussing a skit we don't have. You know where this leaves us, don't you?
Yeah, up Schitt's Creek.
Boom, there's your skit, roll credits.
Oi,
You didn't really think we'd start the episode without a skit, did you, listeners? Hiya, Justin, how you doing?
I'm a good Dan, and every time you outdo yourself, I swear. So, fantastic job, my friend.
Do you know what? Thank you. It started, I wanted to write an elaborate script about the program we're doing. And so obviously it's clear we're going to do Schitt's Creek, right? And I had it in my head. I was going to do Moira's accent. And then I was just struggling. Things were happening. And I thought, I don't have a script. And then I thought, well, the name of the program writes itself, right? So that's when I quickly said to you, Justin, do you think this is good? You loved it. And as soon as you say it, you're the encouragement I need. So
Schitt's Creek totally missed the boat when it comes to having Dan on their writing staff.
I'm available if any sitcom writers out there are listening to this. So yep, you've got it. You're listening to another episode of Pilot Views. I'm Dan, and as always, my co-host here is Justin. Justin, we kind of settled on this together. I can't remember how we fell on this. I think when we both started talking about it, we both said this is a show we really enjoyed, right? It felt like a natural choice, didn't it?
It did. It just kind of evolved as we're kind of making our list of shows that we want to talk about. And I can't remember who brought this one to the table, but I think this is one that I think in unison we both enjoy. Me, to an extent, that we'll get into. But yeah, I think this is one that's popular. It's engaging. It's entertaining. So this one, eventually we're going to get there. It's just, I think it's earlier now because, I don't know, it's just engulfing. I don't know how to explain it. So I don't remember the evolution to it. I'm just talking out of my ass right now.
But before we get stuck into it, so as of now, I haven't got a clue when this will go out, but how is the Movie Wire? How have recent releases been treating you?
As of the last couple of episodes, good God, the summer is finally over. In a summer of just reboots, sequels, requels, whatever you want to call them, I just couldn't wait for the summer to be over. So now we're getting into the back half of the year, and we're going to start to see some good stuff come out. Fingers crossed. So, but the Movie Wire is good. Blood pressure went up. Now it's going to start going down after the summer. So we'll see some good stuff coming out.
Yeah, we did have a couple of episodes of Angry Justin, which I do like. I do like when he makes an appearance. But have you seen The Crow yet? Because at time of recording, it's just come out, and I've seen some very bad things about that.
Yeah, that review will be out by the time this episode's out, but this one will release this week. And yeah, this is probably going to be one of the longest written reviews that I've done, mainly, and not because it's good. This is probably one of my longest bad review, but the whole thing, and I won't give a whole review of it, but my whole thing is morally, the problem I have with reboots is when a talent dies on set, the great Brandon Lee, that's where the art should stay. And I'm going to get into that in my review that people can listen to, but I have a strong opinion about it. But if I had to sum it up, it's not good, Dan.
Spoiler, yeah. Yeah, so I think this is likely to go out, this episode here, October time, maybe November, but October. So I've not really seen. Is there much planned? Do you know? Is there much in the way of Christmas films coming out? I know it's far too early to be talking that we're in the hazy days of summer, right? But is there a lot planned this year, 2024?
Well, the most anticipated one is going to be the new Rock Santa Claus movie coming out. And I know everybody has been wanting to see the Rock fight mythical creatures during Christmas time. So that one I can anticipate being a fun but horrible time at the movie. So, but with me, the show's going to have a Christmas special as we do every year. And hopefully it puts people in the holiday spirit of pure, just drunken Justin review anger.
More so drunk Justin, is that what you're saying?
More so, yes.
We'll get into the episode, but before we do, we are going to hear from your good friend, your co-host of Back to the Balcony, my good friend, and the person who I know enjoys the skits the most that we do. So we're going to hear from Antonio over at the Cultworthy.
The Cultworthy Podcast. Join me, Antonio Palacios, each week as I guide you through a never-ending sea of obscure cinema and cult-worthy gems that deserve a rediscovery. Find me on all listening platforms and at thecultworthy.com. The Cultworthy Podcast. Join us.
Right, so Justin, at Schitt's Creek, talk to me. What was your experience of this, as in your introduction to it and your history?
Well, I think as this hit streaming, a lot of people tuned in just mainly before the cast. The cast is comedic gold. And I got to be honest, when I first got into the first few episodes, I thought it was annoying as hell.
Oh, really?
I did. And to me, I have a love for Catharine O'Hara and the Mora character. And not only that, but Annie Murphy, who plays Alexis. That character in particular drove me nuts. I felt myself getting dumber every time they delivered their lines. And then I realized it's not because it's bad performances. It's brilliant performances, but I hated the characters. But then I began to warm up to them, and I found them engulfing. It's almost like a train wreck of characters that you just can't take your eyes off of. And the annoyance was, by the end of my sixth season, I just realized that it was a brilliant portrayal, because that was the intent, to really have these annoying rich people that have a string of bad luck really take you in. It's annoyance that pulls you in. So I didn't necessarily really grow to love these characters, but I did end up smiling at these characters, and it brought me back week over week or episode after episode. So to me, it's a love-hate relationship. There's some things I really do love about this show, and there's some things that purposely the show makes you do want to hate, and that's what I do respect about this show.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting. And of all the characters, you've not mentioned the one I found the most annoying. For me, it's Roland.
You leave Chris Elliott alone, sir.
Look, I think he's great. He's a great actor in this. And I just think, and we'll come on to it, I think his character to me is the what's the word, is like caricature of the show. Having said that, when you've got Dan Levy and Annie Murphy's characters and Moira, Catherine O'Hara, I'm calling him the caricature. Yeah, I just found him to be the oddball, too much of an oddball, I think. My experience with it I think this was a lockdown, a COVID show for me. It hit streaming. It wasn't, and this is my own version, of course, I don't think it was a massively known show here. And then I was seeing the press for it, and I think I stayed away from it a little bit. I'll be honest. One, because of the name, and two, when I saw Eugene Levy in it, I thought it was going to be another one of these kind of, I know he was in like the American Pie films, etc. The name Schitt's Creek, I thought it was going to be one of these over-the-top spoofs. But it kept getting all these rave reviews, and obviously during lockdown, you're going to watch stuff, right? So we put it on, and I just fell in love with it. It was it's going to be odd, because if you start watching it the first few episodes, maybe the first series doesn't feel like it, but it's a feel-good, heartwarming show for me.
Yeah, I agree. And when we go into the back half of the seasons, that's where it actually really does add some tremendous heart that I really did enjoy. But I'm going to go on defense of Chris Elliott here. So I can't leave that alone. So when it comes to his character, he is a character, but he fits the Motel sleaziness so well that those that have stayed in a motel know that guy. Whether he's hanging out in front of the hotel where he has nothing to do with the hotel, where he works at the motel, this is a motel character that I think Chris Elliott has more experience than most people on this show. So to me, I think he portrays it almost a little too well. But given Chris Elliott's past portrayals in movies, more notably, people will remember him in Scary Movie 2 with the little hands. I think he does a very good job with that. So that's the only thing I'll say on Chris Elliott. But my problem with his character is he never changes. He never grows with the rest of the cast. He stays doing the same thing over and over again. So with that, I will agree with you on it. But you're right. This one did take a little bit of momentum to get through. And I think with COVID, people got introduced to a lot of these shows that went during release a little bit under the radar as it kind of crescendoed. Because I think at one point it wasn't going to continue. And then COVID hit, if I remember correctly. But this one, well-deserved, had like 200, 300 award nominations. And in 2020, again, COVID time, had the most awards in an Emmy season in a comedy category. So to me, this is well-deserved because here, we're going to probably get into it, but there is a lot of smart writing to these characters. And I think it is one main key element.
Yeah, and I'm going to say something that on the surface feels like a dig at it, and I don't mean it like that. And I've been trying to formulate the words in my head properly for weeks, and I've still not got it right. To me, though, there feels like there's no real standout episodes, but there's a lot of standout scenes. And like I said, I'm going to make sure before you jump in, I don't mean it as a negative. What I think I mean is that the episodes roll one into one. There are some episodes that they are literally, they pick up from the moment the previous episode finished. So it does feel like you are spying in on the life of these characters. So it's not necessarily a big set piece, an episode framed around one single set piece. This is a trial and tribulations of this family moving into this out of the way town. So that's I hope people understand. That's I don't mean that as a criticism. While I can't tell, like with Frasier, Cheers, and a couple of upcoming series we're going to do, I can reel off episodes like that. Here, there'll be scenes I'll be telling you about.
No, you're not wrong. And Dan, it's okay to give criticism and just go off the rails. I'm waiting for it. But you're right. I mean, each episode, you can kind of pinpoint one scene that makes that memorable. But the holistic storytelling of each episode, you don't really remember the gist of the whole episode, but that one scene. I mean, before we jumped on, I was kind of reviewing episodes in my head, and the one that comes through as if the question arose of what's the favorite episode, I was thinking of, wow, that one episode where Maura and David were cooking and they were learning how to cook.
Yes.
And then I thought about it. What else happened in that episode? I don't remember because that one scene outshined everything else. So this is a sitcom that's 22 to 27 minutes long, roughly, I believe. Yeah. And you don't remember anything else. So these characters really know the pivotal scenes, and this is where they go all in on, and everything else just kind of takes a back seat. So to me, I think you're not far off. I think you're absolutely spot on because there's not one episode that I can think of from start to finish that I can actively remember.
I love that, Steve. David, what does burnt smell like? But yeah, so we'll start working our way through it. Just as the preamble, so created by Dan and Eugene Levy. Now, this is a proper family affair because obviously Eugene is Dan's dad. You've got Twyla is, and I haven't got a name here.
Sarah Levy.
That's it. Yep. So his daughter. And then, if I'm correct, I think I've seen in the credits, Eugene Levy's wife is part of the crew or the production. So, and I think I really like that maybe that's what makes it feel that real strong core of warmth, maybe because it is a family-run production.
No, I think you're right because, I mean, this is kind of Eugene's Levy's baby from start to finish. I mean, they're active writers, or Dan Levy is producing it, and Sarah is acting in it. So this is a whole family affair from the off-screen to the on-screen. So, and I think that's what really does make this feel comfortable, I would say, feels believable, even though it's a ludicrous plot that we've seen over and over and over again. But it makes it add that certain heart to it.
No, absolutely. So, ran from 2015 to 2020, 80 episodes long. So if you were to sum it up, how would you sum it up?
I would make it simplistic because that's what this show really deserves is rich goes to poor and has to start over in their overly privileged lives that have to go to the common man or common middle class, I would say. And they have to find their ways to build back up. Or the question does arise at some points, do they actually want to build their wealth back up, or do they want to focus on family? So that's a lot of the questions that this show kind of brings to the table subtly is what's more important, money or family? And the money is the driver of the story, but the family is the one holding up the story.
So that's what I've got. So yeah, it's the Rose family and they're very wealthy. So you can tell right from the off, they're a very wealthy family. I think he runs a video business, doesn't he? But the family loses its fortune because the manager, I think, is embezzled it. They lose all their money. And a few years ago, Johnny Rose, Eugene Levy, had bought for his son a town in, and it's never really stated where it is, but in the middle of nowhere called Schitt's Creek as a joke. But now they actually go there to live, don't they? Because that's actually their savior. And as you said, they end up moving in a motel. And this is what my first point I was going to say. So it is a case of the fish out of water. So the mega rich family stay in a sleazy looking rundown motel. Now, I'm going to be honest, when I first saw that, I almost switched off because we've seen that done a lot of times before, haven't we? What was your view on that? Or do you think that, no, there's always room for that? Or was there something in your mind that thought, is it going to be the same old cliches we've seen?
Yeah. And like you said, we've seen it over and over again to the point where you can go two ways with it. Is one, it could be the same cliche we see over and over again, or it could be a cliche that we expect and it gives the audience exactly what they want to an extent, but add something different. And that different is the heart that we see. So to me, I think it is a cliche that we see, but every episode adds something new, something fresh. And it starts with the characters. We get these, and this is, in my opinion, the biggest heart of the movie is seeing the supporting characters around it to add that additional heart, to give that sense of reality, not only to the characters, but to the storytelling. So it's a show full of cliches. We expect some of these cliches, but the one thing that Eugene and Dan Levy do with this story is they take the what they think the audience is going to know with the cliches, and then they add something on top of it. So stuff we may not expect, but they don't go too over the top with it. So I think they have a proper balance here of giving exactly what the audiences want, but with a little bit of spice to it.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like we've said a number of times, it's the warmth of the writing. I think that comes through, and some really clever writing. Now, I'll just run through some of the main characters, especially the ones who are going to be in the pilot. So we've said Eugene Levy's Johnny Rose, the father. You've got Catharine O'Hara as Moira Rose, the mother. And before I go on, maybe I can see why some people might not like her, but I think she's incredible in this. She is brilliant.
I love her, but God, that accent.
That's what I love. That's what I loved about it. I'm still trying to work out what it is. I think the cast are still trying to work out what it was.
Between her and Alexis, I don't think they know what it is. I think they just drank way too much before an episode, and then that's what we get.
So she was the star in the show. She was the star of a soap opera called Sunrise Bay, and that comes with, as you imagine, the glamour, the glitz. She's got more wigs than she's probably had meals in her life. She's got wigs with that she's named. You've got Dan Levy as David Rose, the son, and Annie Murphy as Alexis Rose, the daughter. And it's not going to be harsh to say at the start, they are just the spoiled children, right?
Yeah.
You've got Emily Hampshire as Stevie Budd. She works a desk at the motel. And then, you've got Chris Elliott as Roland Schitt, who's the mayor, and Jennifer Robertson as Jocelyn. So I think that kind of covers the main cast. Now, a couple of things I picked up on. So we've already mentioned, it's a family program. You've mentioned it's got the most Emmy wins in a single season. I did also pick up that Annie Murphy was on the verge of quitting acting together, because I think before the show her house had burnt down, hadn't it? And she had $3 in the bank. And then this came along. I mean, I was going to say how wonderful life can be. It's terrible what happened to her and her fiance's house, but just that moment of fortune for her to get this show, right?
100%. And just a call out of her and her performances, or her performance in Russian Dolls, was fantastic. So I'm glad this was a golden lining for her.
See, it's funny because I've just recently done the Black Mirror episode. She's in the final season of that, and I kept seeing her as that character, even though that was a one episode. It's funny what the mind can do to you. Yeah, and the only other thing I was going to say was, so even though the show ran for 6 years, the life in the show was 3 years. So they spent 3 years in Schitt Creek. I think we've said it, but I'd written a few things here, what I did like and didn't like about the show. Let's start. What was it you liked? I mean, I know you said the warmth.
I think the main thing, and I'll go on a limb here. I mean, Emily Hampshire, I had a secret crush on her during this viewing. There was something about her and her portrayal and her performance that was just so mysterious, but not intentional. We wanted to see if she was going to come out of her shell. So, and I think that speaks largely to kind of what I said about Chris Elliott, to see if he would progress. So coming back, not necessarily to see what would happen to the rich family that went poor, but how we see the middle class grow from these characters coming into their town. That was one thing that I really did like. And we did see Stevie Buds grow a little bit, but not overly. It was a progression and an evolution of this character that almost was like a therapy session, or a test, if you will, of having her build her confidence. And that's what I really liked about that character, is it was believable over 6 seasons, 3 years time, to really grow that character to have self-worth and self-confidence. So to me, that out of all the characters really stood out to me. So I did like that. The comedy is, when it wants to be, like we talked about, is comedy gold when it comes to the particular scenes. But that also is a double-edged sword, is, does it keep engaging for the entire episode, or are we looking for that one individual pivotal scene that's really going to be memorable? So I think there's an unbalance to how the episodes are actually run. But here's one thing, and I'm sure we're going to get into it, that I didn't like. The last couple of seasons, given where it could have gone and how it could have had a bigger impact, I don't think it got there, especially when it comes to the last couple of episodes, where I don't know if it's me thinking of the woulda, coulda, shouldas, but I don't think it reached that emotional impact that I think it was trying to do, because we get hints of an emotional string, but it kind of left us flat, even though they did tie up a lot of bows and they did kind of close it, but I didn't feel anything by the end of the seasons.
I agree with you. I think the emotional impact they were going for with certain characters, and we will discuss it, the impact on one of the characters for me was greater, and they didn't get the focus. Well, little spoiler, she didn't get, I think, the focus she needed. So I'll leave it there as that's a tease. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I've said it's very well written, funny one-liners, the warmth. Generally, all the characters are likable. I've found Roland hard to take at times, and I think you've actually hit the nail on the head. Right? It's not that he's hard to take. I think, yeah, he's the only one who doesn't change. I also put that, I'm not going to say this doesn't happen, but often with these rich family into poor, the rich are often sneering at the poorer family and the town, and the rest of the town will be quite sneering at them being a rich. That doesn't really rear its head too much, and not in an overly nasty way. Yes, there are some comments, especially early on, but you just get the vibe that the Roses just settled down. They know that this town ultimately has saved them, and they're not going to rock the boat by being overly horrible. I think that's the writing. They didn't want to turn them into horrible characters, which could have been easily done, right?
Yeah, well, especially when we take Maura, who has that personality and the characters that she wants to be that character, but instead we get the idea that she wants to be not necessarily rich, but relevant, because she's always trying to get involved in different things. She's trying to speak her mind. There's a sense of not money worth, but relevance to be worthy. So to me, that's what I think made that character.
Yeah, and what I didn't like, the ending did get a little bit fairy tale for all of them. I think it desperately tried to give everyone a happy ending, which actually is quite ironic considering what happens in the final episode as well. But the main thing I've got is that, and again, if this doesn't happen, you run the risk of it getting stale, but the dynamics changed for me partway through the show. So from season 3, when David meets Patrick, now I think Noah Reid, is it? Now Patrick is an absolutely brilliant character, but up until that point, the main element of fun was David riffing with Alexis and also Stevie. Like, David and Stevie really shouldn't be friends, but some of the shenanigans they got up to was fun, and David arguing with Alexis was fun. But then once Patrick moves in, naturally, he's going to be spending more time with David, and it then upset the dynamic a bit. So they tried to make Stevie closer to Johnny, and I think that worked to some extent, but it just felt like it lost a little something for me in that respect.
This one is hard for me because the Patrick dynamic between David didn't work for me. I love Noah Reid as the portrayal of it, but I think it was too contradicting between David, where it was Patrick being too under the radar, too subtle. And I know that was probably the intent to really counteract David's kind of comedic, strong personality, but the dialogue doesn't really support it, doesn't really add anything interesting to the banter that we saw when we had David and Alexis, like you said. So it kind of, when those two are on screen, there's a sweet element to it, but there's no comedic element that we had that throws kind of the episodes off balance of or comedy. So I loved the idea of where they were going to go with it. And I love the idea you have this small town, which almost hints at the subtle undertones of homosexuality not being out in this small middle-class town, the stereotype. And I think they address it fantastically on having these two that really do love each other come together. But in terms of storytelling, I think it feels a little forced. And I think they needed to have a better dynamic between the two to really make it convincing. And I think that's why I went into the ending of the series not really believable. I think the best moments these two had was when they were looking for a wedding venue. And that's where I was invested in these two because, one, I wanted to see their happiness, and two, it's a great situational placement to see what these two can do to really prove to the audience that they deserve to be together. They deserve to have this chemistry in the show specifically.
Absolutely. So I've got some other thoughts. We'll come on to it maybe at the end with some other questions. But so if we have a look at the pilot, it's got a rating of 7.0 on IMDb, which, you know, is reasonable. I did see here that Alexis was originally supposed to be played by Abby Elliott, the daughter of Chris Elliott, who plays Roland, but she was unavailable when the show was picked up, so the role went to Annie Murphy. How do you feel about this as an episode? I think it does what it needs to do, right, without being spectacular. So it sets, like I said, it starts off showing how spoiled they are, how rich they are. I think the scene where everything gets taken away from them is quite funny in a tragic way for them. But you start seeing the insights into them as people. So like Moira is upset at her wigs being taken rather than the house being lost and everything. She's upset about the wigs. You know, the fact that Johnny's bought a town as a joke. This is a town where people live, right? So, you know, it's when you look at it like that, it's doing enough to set the stall out about who they are and where they are in life, right?
Yeah, the pilot sets up everything that we need to. I mean, one, you have the hook, which is going to be the cast. So everybody wants to tune in to see this solid cast. And two, you have the biggest obstacle, which is going to be what we talked about before, the cliches. So we know what's going to happen. This rich goes to poor. We know this. It's how it's going to be executed. And to me, when it comes to the certain elements like the wigs being taken away, that's kind of a funny new element that we haven't seen. But the biggest win on this isn't between O'Hara or Eugene Levy. It's going to be the spoiled kids, because I think that's what the target niche is going to be, is watching almost to a relatable in society today where we see more and more spoiled kids without accountability. And you don't necessarily need the money. We see that with a lot of kids today. But this goes overboard. They just go all in on these two kids that, like I said, it didn't resonate with me because I found it annoying, but I couldn't help but see what happens next. And I think that's what these two characters border to give their own unique hook to tune into the next one. We almost want to see them fail.
No, absolutely. And there's a few things I've picked out. So, as well as that, Moira is the one really who does the digs at the start about where they've moved to. So, and, should mention they move into this motel where they've got adjoining rooms. So the mother and father are in one room and David and Alexis in another, but they're adjoining, right? And Moira turns around and says, I can't remember who she says it to, but she goes, keep an eye on these bags. Apparently in hell, there's no bellman. Moira says, there's a bed. I should probably pull off the cover and burn it. The bit where David goes to see Stevie, I think, for the first time and asks for the business centre, and she comes back with a suitably sarcastic response, doesn't she? Something like, oh, it's outside next to the gym or the fitness centre. The other thing I pulled out from this is it's clearly they're a family also that up until this point have hardly spent time together, if it's not, I think, for her career, Moira's career or Johnny's career, right? Because you get Alexis tends to drop really shocking nuggets of information about her past, doesn't she, throughout? Like, she talks about leaving with Stavros, doesn't she? And they ask who's Stavros, and he goes, he's a shipping millionaire that she's been with for 3 months and who's considered saying, I love you to at some point. But nobody knew about that. And here is when she mentions as well that she knew Mary Kate. I can't remember. Oh, Stavros will get her when Mary Kate finishes with his boat or something. I can't remember. I can't read my notes there. Alexis and David argue who should get the bed closest to the door because that will be, if they get broken in, they'll be murdered first, and they're arguing who will get that bed. Oh, and then again, another little insight. Roland just won't leave the room when he's settled them in. And Johnny snaps at him saying there's a pharmacy worth of drugs wearing off right now. So again, another insight about the booze and the medication that specifically I think Moira's on, right? So yeah, I think the whole opening does just enough right to set up the rest of the program. Yeah, I don't think you can really say much more than that, right?
No, I mean, it gives exactly what a pilot would want to give. But the only thing different in this one, I think this one was, when it comes to a lot of shows that come to streaming, they almost start off well produced in the first place. And I think this one with Eugene Levi's family, with their investment in it, I think looks a little bit better too. So I think this one was properly planned on what vision they wanted to do. And we can get nuggets of that throughout. And I love that you touched on the Alexis, where we get little pieces of her previous life. And it's almost like finding out information on your daughter years later. You're like, that's not what I thought my daughter was. But we get that in a Rich perspective where he still doesn't really care. You have Eugene Levi's eyes just get really big and he does his reaction. Then we move on. So I think it caters to the talent on screen on how it's handled, and it sticks well with the character portrayal as well. So I think not just the pilot, but going into the next 2, 3, 4 episodes, I think holistically gives, like you said, it gives us exactly what it's intended to do.
Well, that's it. And because Moira, there's a bit where Alexis is talking about leaving, and Moira says, I'm appalled that my baby is turned into a selfish, duplicitous whore. And I was thinking, that's a mother talking to a daughter, right? And again, it's just this constant reinforcing. And we do see over time that David is her favourite, ultimately, right? But we do see this thing that Alexis has led her own life and at times has been shocking that they don't know about. And when she was also quite young, we kind of find out it's drip fed to us. And I find this fascinating, and it's probably more going to come in at my thoughts at the end, but this is what this show does well. It's, while they look like a family who's well off, they don't really know each other. And now they're forced to spend 4 years in one room, basically, isn't it?
It's like a nightmare for
yeah.
some.
Well, yeah. Now, did you have anything else about the pilot to call out?
About the pilot, no. We're probably going to get into it. But the pilot, I think, was, again, well-produced. It was well thought out on what it wanted to be. So it didn't really add any surprises. It really embraced the cliche and gave us some really good, like we talked about before, specific moments that's memorable. And we can't say that a lot with pilot episodes, because a lot of pilot episodes will maybe have vague recollection of it. But there are moments in this pilot that really are pretty memorable when it comes to how the delivery goes off. So the pilot, I think, is a well-done pilot.
Agreed. So if we skip to the finale and then we'll talk about favourite bits of the show afterwards. The finale, I've only got the last episode here, but technically it really is a two-parter, isn't it? The penultimate and the finale, they feel like it's a two-part. The actual final episode is called Happy Ending. There is a pun on that. If you've seen the show, you know. It's rated 9.3 on IMDb, which is a fantastic score there. It swept all 7 major comedy awards in the 72nd Primetime Emmy, and it was the first time a comedy or drama series received all 7 awards. Now, the finale, so it is all about ultimately where the family end up, and specifically David and Patrick getting married. You've mentioned the things about the ending, so you talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, with me, again, everybody's going to have their own emotional interpretation, their own emotional attachment to a lot of these characters. And with me, it's just not the direction I really wanted. It didn't really hit the ball or the emotional impact with me because I wanted more. The one specific that I will say redeeming point of it, and I spoke to the Patrick David relationship in earlier, is this is where I think in the final episode, this is what I either wanted more of during the seasons or I wanted less of. Because this one really did hit me emotionally, and it was them buying the house and Patrick surprising David. That one got me to think of, man, did I really want this kind of relationship during the 6 seasons or the 4 seasons, whatever it may be, of when they meet, or did I want the comedy aspect of it? And I think that made me a little bit more frustrated because I kind of don't know. I'm in the middle of it. I wanted something. I wanted what I had in the last episode to happen during their time together, the entire seasons, because it really did make me emotional on the heart that went into making these two have their happy ending, where David is the last person almost that you would think would stay in this town, and they make it believable and they make it so tremendously beautiful that that's what I really wanted more of.
Yeah, because, and I've got a feeling, I thought I had written this down, and maybe I've uploaded my wrong version of my notes, but yeah, you're right, because basically up till now, so David ultimately buys this shop in the town or takes over a shop, does like an apothecary of some sort, I think, or that's what it's called, isn't it? But it's like an upmarket general store. And Patrick is the business manager, helps him, and they fall in love. And yeah, as you said, Patrick is like the level-headed, down-to-earth, normal person, with David being the high-maintenance one. And you would say there is no way that David would stay in the town, and he ends up being the only one who does. I think they do just enough of a good job to make it believable that he would do, because, and this is the thing, I thought I had a note here, but there's a really touching scene with David and Stevie looking at the house, and David was saying something along the lines of, I want to go back to New York to Stevie's saying, why are you leaving us? Why are you leaving me? Come back. And he goes, I want to show the people in New York that I've won. And she's saying, look at Patrick, look at the house, look at what you've got. You have won. And that's the moment I think that makes him realize that he doesn't have to live up to anyone else's expectations anymore. He's got everything now, hasn't he?
I love that. And I love the messaging of money doesn't buy everything. And I love the fact that Stevie's the one to really take it home with that messaging, because you have this town that's absolutely already happy. There's struggles. You can see the struggles. But at the end of the day, it's a community and everybody seems to be happy in their own way, except for our rich people. And it's not because they lost it all. It's because they have to adjust to interacting with cultural differences. So I think that was a great written scene where it's not, again, over the top, but it really hits it home as that exclamation mark of dialogue that really does have that self-realized. And that's one of those emotional, memorable moments in some of these episodes that we see kind of in the back half of seasons, I would say probably 4 to 6, that really does try and crescendo it to mean something. And I think that's done extremely well.
Yeah, and not just in the finale, but throughout the show, I think it does serious bits really well. One of my real bugbears with sitcoms is when they go really heavy-handed on the emotional moments. It's, it's really jarring. I mean, they've all done it. Frasier has done it for me. There's a massive one over here, Only Fools and Horses. Towards the end, it felt like it was more drama than sitcom. Whereas I think Schitt's Creek does it so well that you don't realise it's hammering you with an emotional bit. It just feels like you're watching the life of a family, which for most of the time is funny, but then you have these subtle little moments where there's that, they chisel at anyone's stone cold heart, with a little bit of warmth, right?
100%. So, and at one point, I think we're going to have to talk about the Ted and Alexis relationship, by the way.
Yeah, let's do it now then. Over to you.
So this one, I think, is the believable one. This is kind of to me, the believable relationship where you kind of had the moronic vet that falls in love with the beautiful moron, the beautiful stuck up one. So I think this one, when it comes to, if we're going to compare like Patrick and David and Alexis and Ted, this is a relationship I did actually find overly cutesy and believable because the chemistry was there, because they are almost alike, but you have kind of a stupid outlook of the rich, and you have kind of just, oh God, what's the word I want to use? I'll just use innocent, the innocent character of Ted. And the way they interact reminds me of almost like elementary school or middle school or high school students. So there's a elementary relatability to these two as they grow their relationship. But I have to say, the one thing that really drives me nuts with the Alexis character, and every time she does it, it really just makes me angry, is when she always puts up her nose and looks down. I hate it. Every time it's just a cringe and I want to walk out of the room, and she does it so much, especially when we see her interacting with Ted. I hate it.
You leave her alone. I get it. So Ted is played by Dustin Milligan. And yeah, ultimately they've seen each other, then they break up, don't they? Because then she kind of has something for the worst named character, Mutt, in there, who turns out to be Jocelyn and Roland's son. And then they do get back together. And yeah, this is the thing. I think their relationship is lovely. So I'm going to save a little bit I was going to say, because there's a question I'm going to ask you at the end. But what I was saying at the start, so the finale, Moira gets rolled back on a reboot of Sunset Bay, I think it's called. And so her and Johnny are going back to California for a bit for her job. He's set up like a motel business and has got Roland and Stevie in on it. So they're set up. David's staying in Schitt's Creek. So Alexis is going back ultimately to New York on her own, right? And the thing is, she's going back on her own, so without a family, and has just broken up with Ted, but in a good way, because he's in the Galapagos, isn't he, for his dream job, and she's grown enough to realize that she needs to let him do that. And I kind of feel sad for her a little bit in the finale. That's the one character I feel doesn't get the overly happy ending, even though she's got her own business now. And I find it hard to say, because I think it feels like she deserved that moment of absolute joy in the final.
She does. And again, I think all the characters at one point deserve a happy ending, but this one, I think, is that innocence to her, but at the same time, the annoyance. So she wasn't the number one I was rooting for, just because I think the portrayal with this character is overly snotty. And we see that a lot in the body language, like I said, with the nose being curled up. And that's to say, almost shove it in our face that you're lifting your nose at someone. And it doesn't need to be in body language. But to an extent, I think Ted brings out that innocence in her, that it started late. And I started to really get intrigued in this character, but she didn't do it by herself. And I think that's my main problem with the Alexis character, is it took a counterpart to really bring that out of her. And the rooting for her started too late for me to really care about her outcome compared to the other characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does happen quite late on, because it's Twyla, isn't it, that makes her realise that she should be supporting Ted. It's that realisation, and that's when, she starts becoming a far more likeable character in that sense, where you see her softening a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, the finale is all about everyone getting a good ending. I mean, we just got to call out Catherine O'Hara's outfit as the minister for the wedding, right? That's where she comes out is just astonishing, isn't it?
It matches the character perfectly.
it was one of those moments. It's almost like a spit take, isn't it? Because it's like you just can't believe it. She must have had so much fun doing this role, I think.
This one I love with any role she plays. That's why I'm a big fan. She just really engulfs herself in this. And if there's anything, like I spoke to earlier, of her wanting to be relevant, this is where it crescendos to the relevant, to the just look at me, for the love of God, look at me.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And the other thing about the final is we find out that Twyla is basically a multimillionaire, isn't she? So she's running this cafe, which I think in the pilot Moira calls gross and disgusting. Yeah, she reveals to Alexis that she won $92 million on the lottery, which she shared with an ex-partner. So ultimately she's there because she's happy with that as her life. And again, it's a real, right at the end of the show, couple of sentences, but it really hits home that it is about what you're after in life, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I really dug about the messaging, at least by the end of this show, is, and I use the word frequently in this episode, of relevance. So you have those you want desperately to have people know who you are based on what you have. But then you have those that know what an individual has, and you just don't really care what other people think. And I think that's one thing that separates two groups of people on their personalities, of flaunting versus I just want to live my life and be happy. And I love that messaging, because it could have easily gone to what you brilliantly said in the beginning of just talking about the cliches. It could have easily gone to the revenge. It could have easily gone to that stereotypical cliche, but it doesn't. It takes a message and it makes it almost a shame on you if you're flaunting money. Just live your life and be happy. And that's what I think is the most important message that a sitcom can easily misstep, is just the overall messaging of happiness, no matter how much money you have, no matter what materials you have, is just to live your life. Because again, you only get one of them. And that's another aspect that the show really puts a bow on at the end, is the happiness in life.
Yeah. Again, it's just another scene where Twyla offers Alexis money for a business, but Alexis turns it down, which again is just another important scene for Alexis, isn't it? Because again, we would expect her at the start to just rip that check out of her hand, probably with her hand still attached to it, right? But it just shows the turnaround. So I think the finale does a good enough job. Well, no, it does a good job. It's a great episode. I think, you know, if you could level a criticism, it probably is a bit fairy tale ending, but that is the feel of the show, isn't it? It's not supposed to leave you gutted or distraught that somebody is suffered a great loss or something. So yeah, I think overall they worked a really good ending to the series.
You know, I've realized that when it comes to any series finale, there's never going to be anything that blows me in per se out of the water. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Is you grow with this show, you invest your time into this show. There is nothing that can 100% satisfy anybody, because it is the saying goodbye to something that you've invested your time with. When we first started doing this show, and thinking back to a lot of pilots to season finales, to me, it is very difficult to find a season finale that I just said, I loved that. So the bar is going to be set with, it's fine. It was respectable. And I think that's the key word for me when I see a series finale. It was respectable. And when it comes to this, I think it was a little too fairy tale. I think, to me, I've already said I was a huge fan of, but I do like moments in it that I really wish I would have saw a little bit earlier. So this would go in a high ranking of mine, which is it's fine. But in series finales, that's a high mark in my books. Because there's never going to be anything past that bar, because it's hard to say goodbye to a lot of these characters that we follow over 3 or 6 seasons.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed it. I think it's great for a show to get an ending for a start. Let's say that in the modern day. But yeah, I think it does a good enough job. Now, before I come on to some final other sections for you, so I mentioned about Alexis. So I've written some things down from her here that she said, and there's a bit where the family are playing the lie game. Alexis says, "My eyes are brown. I'm basically sample sized. And one time I escaped from a Thai drug lord's car trunk by bribing him with sex." And Johnny's trying to work it out. And Moira goes, Johnny, her eyes are aqua. You know what I mean? In that the other two was true. She says, I went on a blind date to Bali with Leo. Diplo still sends me nudes. That's Alexis talking, not me. Talking about her relationship with Ted, she says the actual longest relationship she had was a 3-month affair with a Saudi prince. But for the last 2 months of that, I was trapped in his palace trying to get to an embassy. When David was missing, oh, that's another funny episode. And he ends up on the, is it the Amish farm?
Yes.
Oh, she goes to him because he says something about nobody cared about him being missing. And she goes, do I have to remind you of the time I was taken hostage on David Geffen's yacht by Somali pirates for a week and nobody answered my texts? She shouts at him, were you picked up by South Korean secret police on New Year's? I had to sweet talk the consulate to get me a passport before midnight. She says, if Prince Harry trusted me with his life, then I think you can too. And I stole this dress from Ashley Simpson, or rather she stole it from me and I stole it back. So, I mean, there's just one of the things that we keep, you know, you could make a film out of those little nuggets she drops throughout the 6 series, right?
You see, with that character, I think they really tried to make her the one-line character that just says the most ridiculous things and make it quotable, because that's the one thing that really did keep Alexis interesting is a lot of the dialogue that comes out of her mouth. So I think by you stating just on a run of lines, it's hard not to smile, especially when you deliver it. So
that's just a handful as well. I think if you go through it, there's a lot more. So I was going to ask you some overall thoughts about the show again as a whole. I know we talked about it at the start, but so I've said here, like, it did take a fall from grace to bring them together as a family. Now, based on everything we've said up till now, and I think that's why I was saying that they're clearly a family that has spent all their life apart, and now being together, they've actually learned who they are. I mean, God, that sounds like such an 80s like rom-com cliche, right? But it is true. I've said about meanness not being the main plot point, and that's it. I've got 2 scenes here that for me stand out. So you got the bit where Moira and Johnny go for a meal and they bump into their city friends, and then Roland and Jocelyn turn up, and the friend is kind of he's running the town down, isn't he? I can't remember what he's calling, like Crap Valley or whatever. And Johnny at one point can't take it and actually has a go at him, doesn't he? And says basically, you know, get out, stop saying that this is a great town. They've taken me in. You didn't give me a phone call after my trouble. You didn't email. You didn't call me or anything. And one other scene really stands out in my mind. You know, Alexis goes back to school, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And you know, there's a bit where there are girls passing a note and it's clearly about her. And then at one point, the teacher gets a note. And you think it's going to be that classic Mean Girls. They're going to be saying, oh, look at her, who she think it is. But the note says, oh my God, isn't she pretty? I wonder where she got that dress from. And again, I was ready for it to roll my eyes at that mean bit, and it wasn't.
Yeah, those are one of those moments that they don't go the cliche route, and they really amplify what would be a cliche, and then they just kind of go off left with it. So to me, I think that's one of those nuggets that we talk about that really they attack the assumption of the viewer, and they just kind of pull the curtain. But they don't use it as a twist. They don't use it as a shock. They use it with warmth and heart to really move that tone of the show forward. So I think that is one of the smart writing by, I think the one you're talking about was written by Eugene Levy.
And the final one I want to bring about, because I think you have to talk about this with this show. And, you know, it's clear that there's a lot of positive representation of relationships, isn't there, across it? I mean, at one point, they make it the subject of a couple of episodes. David and Stevie are in a 3-way relationship, it feels like, with one of the other town members, right? And obviously the Patrick and David relationship. And at no point they're trying to make it, you know, a lot of programs often try to make it almost a point, don't they? Whereas it feels like in the writing of this, Dan and Eugene have said, we just want to represent a normal relationship or a loving relationship. And that's it. There's no real episodes that features that classic animosity. Like you think there is when they invite his parents to town and they don't know they're lovers and they let it slip. And you think the parents are going to have a go at him about it, but it's not. I think they're just saying, oh, you didn't tell us you had a business or something like that, you know, and again, it throws the viewers off. And I just think that these relationships, they just show it as people in love rather than trying to make a point with it. I hope I've explained that well, but yeah, I just thought that was really great to see.
No, you explained it extremely well because it takes a stereotype of what people or assume society will treat some certain topics, and then they go sideways with it. It's almost showing the evolution of how acceptance is evolving today. And I absolutely love that is it goes more for the positive than it does rewarding the negative. And I love the fact that it doesn't go with those stereotypical cliches. You spoke to the parents and maybe hinting at unacceptance. And I love the fact it never goes that route. It's a positive show to deliver a positive message. And that's the intent of what they're trying to do. So I love the fact it wants to stay beautiful in terms of messaging and not dwell on negativity because these characters by themselves are in a negative situation, but they still don't treat it like a negative situation. It really does encourage the positive thinking, whether that's from the supporting cast or whether that's from the actual main characters, or like we're just talking about now, the situational pieces of it. Not once does this show go to the negative. And there's one episode that watching it, I think shit's gonna hit the fan. And it's where we have I can't remember, I think it was in season 5, the housewarming party, where Ted and David end up kissing because Ted has way too much to drink. And you think that's really going to go to a very detailed conflict, but they handle it so subtly to a point, but humorous. And it's still, even with situations where, your brother is kissing your boyfriend, it really does handle it really well. And it's still by the end of the episode, really treats it as just a part of, I guess I want to say, human nature where we want to react, but at the same time, we want to solve. So I think a lot of that is smart writing here, and it really shows smart writing with an intent to do good.
Yeah, and I think he says that classic line, doesn't he, to Stevie? I think he's saying, sometimes I like red wine, sometimes I like white wine, and sometimes I like rose. He says, basically, I'm not looking at the label, I'm interested in the wine. And again, just that's the only bit of the show where you feel like there's a message around that. Other than that, nobody blinks an eye that there's a couple here that's in a same-sex relationship. It's just people. And yeah, that sentence. And I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix, there's a special that they did after the final. That line, I think, is on T-shirts and everything because it is a great line. Now, the other thought I had was, for a small town in the middle of nowhere, why is every person under the age of 25 so damn good looking? Everyone is so good looking. And that's the thing that caught me on that show.
I have no answer to that, Dan, except it's a TV show. So, I mean, I think given Chris Elliott, to your point, maybe throws the balance of being unattractive off. So they need to counter it with a lot of people under 25 being attractive because you have our Chris Elliott character. So that would be the only saying I would say against it, I guess.
I mean, the only other thing, I probably didn't like overall was when they did try to do the triangle between Mutt, Ted and Alexis a little bit. That felt a bit cliched line. But what are kind of like your funniest bits or standout bits for you? Do you have any of those to share?
Other than the cooking, which is my favorite moment, I think seeing Maura go back into acting and just seeing her in the crow outfit and trying to give the director some notes, because she has her big book binder with notes on this movie that's obviously a B movie and the director doesn't take it serious, but she does. And I love that this is the perfect moment to show what Maura is to show the relevancy of it. And to me, it's an underlying humor of just one, seeing O'Hara in a crow outfit, and two, trying to make something more important to an amplified level than we see her anywhere else in the show, to be taken seriously in something that obviously shouldn't be taken seriously. It's like when she ran for, I think it was city council or something like that, where she just goes over the top with everything that she does. So O'Hara is my favorite piece of this show that just really surprised me, because I had an annoyance for her in the beginning, but the situations that she's in and how she handles it made me love her.
I really want to see that film.
Me too.
Yeah. They need to have done it. They should have done like a little 40-minute, long episode on that.
Demand the movie, Dan.
Yeah. I've got the bit where Johnny and Moira are trying to go to, is it Roland's cabin out in the woods, and they break into Bob's cabin, not realising it's his, and they're making love. Him and Moira make love while Bob and his wife are in the room next door, and they said, we just didn't want to disturb you. But for me, I'll do the other ones, and I'll do my most favourite one. I've got Moira's dress as a minister for me will stand out. Oh, and simply the best featuring, so you've got Patrick sings it at the open mic night in a really nice version. Then you've got an episode or two later, you've got David sings it to Patrick because I think they've had an argument, and to make up for it, he's singing it back. I just thought those two bits were really, really good the way they were done. But for me, the standout, and I've watched this so many times and I'm crying with laughter for me, is, the episode, I think it's in the first season, where Moira's doing the advert for the wine, Herb Ertlinger's fruit wine. And at the end, she's doing the advert and she's just so drunk that at the end she just descends into a bit of swearing, doesn't she? Because she can't get his name right. And I've seen that so many times and it makes me cry every time. Like we said, though, that's just a handful. There's so many we could have gone through, right? My final question, Sharon, I don't know if you've got anything else, is which character for you, or characters, evolved the most? Now, there's an argument that other than Roland, they all did. I've got two written down, but I'd love to know what your view is.
I think we've kind of hinted at it, which would be the David character. David, to me, is one, when it comes to character growth, and my personal opinion of what I stated in the beginning when we started this show, is there was a certain annoyance to it, but David was different than Alexis. David was kind of the really defined spoiled kid that really his situation annoyed me more than his betrayal. And when we get to it, we really do want him to find happiness, and it's properly evolved with some bumps down the road. But I think by the end of the season, I think it's a little unbalanced, but I think by the time we get there, it's believable and it makes sense. And we talked about Stevie doing the aha moment for him. And sometimes characters, we don't need to have our hands held during the show. We need to have us reflect on how he got through his journey. And if it takes the last 2 episodes out of the 80 episode run to say, this was my aha moment, and it makes me reflect on how he got there, I think it's a well-developed character. So in reflection, I think that David is the one that did evolve, because even if we see from the pilot, he almost toned it down very slowly as we get through it, especially when he starts dating Patrick. It really tames him a little bit, where it goes from just annoying, privileged, rich kid to kind of a high-maintenance, nitpicky, complaining boyfriend, where kudos to Patrick. I mean, God, that would drive me nuts.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's not a name I've got written down there, but, there's no denying what you said. He does clearly change, especially as he wants to settle down in that town. I'm going to do one that, because it's not a massive change, and it's one my wife disagreed strongly with me on this one. I did initially put Stevie down, but yeah, the reason for my wife's disagreement is that she shows no ambition, in the sense of she doesn't want to leave. They say, come to New York. She doesn't want to go. She wants to stay in Schitt Creek. By the end of it, she's become a businesswoman, and she's showing ambition to want to succeed. At the start, she just wanted to throw out sarcastic one-liners, right? And just sit behind that desk playing solitaire all day, wasn't it? But, she's got that change for the business. For me, I've put Alexis, because, she's become the businesswoman as well at the end. She turns down the money from Twyla, like I said, but also, we've hinted at it. So she broke up with Ted in a good way. But I think also, I can't remember if they hint at it or they say it, all those one-liners I was saying about her past, this is almost like the one time she's realised she doesn't have to be with anyone. She doesn't have to be with a man. And I think that's a realisation where she now, she spent all her life having to be with someone to support her. And now she's happy to go on her own. And yeah, I think that's subtle, not so subtle, total 180, if that's the right one for her, and just put her on a different path. So yeah, I've kind of put Alexis in that for me. So
you're not too far off. I think Alexis and David kind of have the same kind of development throughout, where it's the aha moment. But I'm with you, and I think I'm going to get in trouble with your wife, but I'm with you on Stevie, because it's it doesn't have to be the action, right? You don't have to do something to have a character grow. It's what the behavior demonstrates. And kind of what we said in the beginning is she gradually starts to show confidence, where you have this mopey, stereotypical motel desk clerk that really you think is just going to be that dry humor kind of character that doesn't go anywhere. But she actually does go in a behavioral aspect, really does grow some confidence to become a businesswoman, to want to show the want to learn, the want to be better in a Stevie kind of way. So I think you're spot on that Stevie is one we didn't think would grow as much, but she does behaviorally without saying, I have to go to a different place to show that I have grown, to demonstrate how I've grown. We see it. She's the most consistent out of the entire cast that we see a consistent growth with. So we don't need an action from her at the end, because I think she's demonstrated exactly how this character has grown by season 6.
Yeah, and also what's just come to mind is the town put on the show of Cabaret, don't they? She takes the lead role, which if you'd have asked her at the start of the series, she probably never would have done it. And the other thing I just want to say about Emily Hampshire there is, for a lot of the show, she's playing very straight-faced, barely cracks a smile or emotion, but the way she uses that straight face to show those kind of, like, you can hear the eye roll rather than see it. She does so much with a straight face to convey that sarcasm or disdain for people at the start, doesn't she?
Well, they had that one episode where her and David go to flight attendant school, or the interview process, and it's almost like they want to compete, and then David gets let go right away, and then she succeeds, and then she realizes this isn't her. She's not necessarily a friendly person. You see her just running to the car to escape. So to me, it's that actionable piece of it as well. So, I mean, that's probably the biggest facial expression we get, is her running away from having to give good customer service in a job.
Yeah. Look, I think we can agree that it is just a really good, fun show. I didn't really know before, but, Dan Levi, I don't know how famous he was before this, but, if that's what he can produce, working with his dad, I just think it's a phenomenal story using a well-worn plot device. I think he's worked, him and Eugene, I think have worked a really great show here.
100%, because you said the exact word. Dan is a producer. That's what he does. And he is a producer on this show along with his father. But after this show, it did exactly what you said, which is show him what he can do. So we are now starting to see him pop up more and more. And I hope we do get more of him, because even though at times there's some amateurishness coming from it, where you can tell he's a producer coming into an acting gig with his family. But when we take him out of the family, I'd be curious to see the more and more projects that he does, what he can really do, because I think he has demonstrated some really good potential. And he has that on-screen presence and being familiar in Schitt's Creek, that we see him on screen, we'll be like, we know that guy. Let's see what he's got.
Yeah. Anything else from you before we start wrapping up?
No, I mean, when it comes to just shows that hit streaming, with tons and tons and tons of stuff out there right now, and it's hard to keep up. There's new shows pop up every day that people come out with. So, I mean, if you haven't watched Schitt's Creek, take a watch, because this one does have those elements or nuggets for everybody to kind of enjoy. But I think when it comes to what you watch, this one, to get the full experience of themes and messaging, you can't just watch the first season. You have to go all the way to 6, or else it just becomes just that, a silly sitcom with a deeper message. But you will miss the message until you get to season 6.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's on Netflix. At least over here, all 6 seasons on Netflix. As you said, it's only 20 minutes a show. There's 12 episodes a season, I think, something like that. So it's not going to set you back a huge amount of time. So look, thank you very much for coming on to talk about that again, Justin. We've got negotiations going. I think we've got the next 2 that we're going to do. We'll continue to work on the paperwork behind the scenes there. Do you just want to shout out again your show and where the lovely people listening can hear you?
Yeah, I mean, you can check out The Movie Wire anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can check out me and the Cultworthy Cinema Podcast news show, Back to the Balcony, on YouTube. And you can follow me on any of the socials at Movie Wire Show.
And for me, you're listening to me, so you know where to get me. You can get hold of me across all social media at Casting Views. If you just search for Casting Views, you'll find my face looking back at you. If you've got ideas for shows you'd like to hear as a part of a pilot view, so as I said, Justin and I are constantly talking about what shows we're going to pick up. But if there's anything screaming out at you that you think you'd love to hear the beautifully voiced Justin and I talk about, just drop me a note. Otherwise, I will see you next week for another episode of Casting Views.
1, 2, 3, 4. If I want your opinion, I will give it to you. Come on, check what we've got, 'cause you need it. Don't make us get a spark and force